The distress beacon from New Eden Colony pierced through space like a desperate scream. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TSS Remembrance, her weathered hands gripping the command rail as she watched the tactical display. At 73, she should have been enjoying retirement on Earth. Instead, she commanded humanity's last available warship, crewed entirely by veterans pulled from retirement. Multiple Kryvax warships detected. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez reported, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the data. Their energy signatures are off the charts. The Colonial Defense Force. They're being slaughtered. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. The Kryvax had appeared 6 months ago, their crystalline ships cutting through humanity's newest defensive systems like paper. The regular fleet was in shambles, and the colonial militias were falling one by one. High Command had been desperate enough to reactivate the Remembrance, a 30-year-old dreadnought that most considered a museum piece, and crew it with veterans who remembered how to fight without relying on the latest AI-driven combat systems. Status of the colony? Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. 15,000 civilians in the underground bunkers, Rodriguez replied. Colonial Defense Force is down to 20% strength. They're using the new Aegis combat systems, but the Kryvax are adapting faster than the AI can learn. Chen straightened her spine, feeling the familiar ache of old combat injuries. Send word to all decks. This is why they brought us back. Show me the crew manifest. The holoscreen flickered to life, displaying faces that bore the marks of decades of service. Engineers who could coax dying engines back to life, with nothing but intuition and duct tape. Gunners who could target by eye when sensors failed. Marines who had fought in every hellhole humanity had encountered in the past 50 years. Average age of the crew is 65. Admiral, her XO, Commander David Wells, reported with a hint of pride. Youngest is 52, combined combat experience. Over 2,000 years. Chen allowed herself a grim smile. The Kryvax think they have us figured out because they can hack our new systems and predict our standard tactics. Time to show them some old tricks. Sound general quarters. The Remembrance's ancient klaxon echoed through the halls, a sound that had heralded humanity's finest hours in conflicts long past. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Maria Torres ran her hands over controls that were refreshingly analog, her team of retired engineers moving with practiced precision. Loading manual targeting solutions, Rodriguez announced. Gunners reporting ready. They're saying the old girl's controls feel just like they remember. Chen watched as the Kryvax fleet approached, their crystalline ships glowing with impossible energies. The enemy had never faced a ship like the Remembrance, never encountered tactics developed in the brutal wars of humanity's earlier expansion. They had no data to predict what veterans with nothing left to lose might do. All hands, this is the Admiral. Chen's voice carried to every corner of the ship. The enemy thinks they're facing obsolete technology and worn-out soldiers. They believe that their superior systems and predictive algorithms make victory inevitable. But they've never faced humans who learned to fight before computers told them how. We're here because we know that warfare isn't just about technology. It's about grit, instinct, and the willingness to do the impossible. She paused, watching the enemy draw closer. Every person on this ship has seen more battles than most active-duty soldiers today have seen simulations. We're here because sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Sometimes victory requires human hearts and human minds, not artificial ones. Today, we teach the Kryvax why humanity survived every threat we've ever faced. The Remembrance's engines rumble to life, the sound different from modern ships' silent propulsion. It was a war cry from another era, announcing the arrival of warriors who had been counted out but refused to fall. Helm, plot intercept course, Chen ordered. Engineering, give us everything the old girl has left. Weapons, prepare for knife-fighting range. We're going to show these aliens why they should have left us in retirement. As the Remembrance moved to engage, its elderly crew worked with the smooth efficiency that only came from decades of experience. They knew that sometimes the best weapons weren't the newest ones, and the most dangerous soldiers weren't the youngest. Sometimes victory required the wisdom that only time could provide. The battle for New Eden was about to begin, and humanity's veterans were ready to prove that there was no replacement for experience. Multiple targeting locks. Rodriguez called out as the Kryvac ships surrounded the Remembrance. Their crystalline vessels pulsed with energy, their automated systems calculating billions of possible scenarios per second. But Admiral Chen saw something the computers missed. "Notice how they're positioning themselves, David," she asked her XO. "Standard Cavan Delta formation. Same thing the Centaurians tried in '89. Commander Wells nodded, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Before they developed their gravity lance. You were at the Battle of Proxima, along with half our bridge crew." Chen's fingers danced across her tactical display, drawing patterns only veterans of that forgotten war would recognize. The Kryvacs copied our enemy's tactics, but they never learned why those tactics failed. The enemy ships fired, their energy weapons lancing through space. But the Remembrance was already moving, its trajectory seemingly erratic to modern combat computers. Chief Engineer Torres had modified the engines to pulse irregularly, creating a movement pattern that confused predictive targeting. "They're trying to read our maneuver algorithms," Rodriguez reported. "But we're not using any. Hard to predict human intuition," Chen replied. "Especially when it's been honed over half a century. Weapons, target the lead ship, just like we did at Proxima." The Remembrance's main guns roared to life. They weren't the sophisticated energy weapons of modern vessels, but solid mass drivers that had been upgraded and maintained by the same engineers for 30 years. The gunners, their hands steady with decades of practice, aimed manually. The lead Kryvac ship's shields flared as they attempted to adapt to the incoming fire. But the veterans had loaded their shots with a mix of materials and velocities that overwhelmed the adaptive shielding's ability to compensate, a trick learned from countless battles against other advanced races. Direct hit. The tactical officer's voice carried the satisfaction of experience vindicated. Their shields aren't designed to handle kinetic variations. They expected energy weapons. Chen allowed herself a tight smile. They studied our current fleet, learned all about our eye-targeting systems and predictive combat protocols. But they never bothered to look at how we won our early wars. The Remembrance shuddered as it took hits, but its heavily armored hull, considered obsolete by modern standards, absorbed punishment that would have shattered the energy shields of newer ships. In engineering, Torres and her team worked with practiced efficiency, rerouting power through backup systems they'd maintained religiously, despite regulations saying they were unnecessary. "Enemy formation is breaking up," Rodriguez reported. "They're trying to regroup into. I don't recognize this pattern." "But I do," Commander Wells said grimly. "Thracian Gambit. They're accessing old combat records, trying to adapt." "Good." Chen's expression hardened. "That means they're starting to realize their mistake. Signal the gun crews. Switch to pattern Epsilon. Let's show them why experience matters." The Remembrance's weapon systems fired in sequences that made no sense to modern tactical computers, but had proven devastatingly effective in wars long past. The veteran gunners coordinated without computer assistance, drawing on countless hours of practice and real combat experience. In the ship's Marine contingent, Colonel Diana Martinez watched her troops prepare for possible boarding actions. Her soldiers were all veterans of the Consortium Wars, experts in zero combat who had fought in environments where high-tech weapons were worse than useless. "They'll try to hack our systems," Martinez briefed her troops. "But there's no AI in a combat knife, and no algorithm can predict the fury of a human who's survived a dozen wars." Back on the bridge, Chen watched as the battle evolved. The Kryvac ships were adjusting, but slowly their sophisticated systems struggling to analyze and counter tactics that predated their strategic databases. "They're learning," Wells observed. "Too late," Chen replied. "You can't download experience. You can't quantify intuition. Every veteran on this ship has something no AI can replicate, the wisdom to know when to break the rules. The Remembrance continued its dance through space, its aged hull scared but unbowed, its veteran crew demonstrating why humanity had survived every threat it had ever faced. They weren't just fighting with old tactics, they were showing why those tactics had worked in the first place. As the battle raged on, the Kryvacs were learning a lesson that every enemy of humanity eventually learned. Technology could be copied, tactics could be analyzed, but there was no substitute for the accumulated wisdom of soldiers who had spent their lives defending humanity's place among the stars. The old ship and its veteran crew were more than relics of the past. They were living proof that humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology, but the indomitable spirit of those who wielded it. Hull breach on Deck C. Taurus's voice crackled over the comms. But you should see what they look like. Admiral Chen gripped her command rail as the Remembrance shuddered from another impact. 3 Kryvac ships lay shattered in their wake, but the victory had cost them. Emergency force fields flickered throughout the ship, maintained by systems that engineers like Taurus had insisted on keeping despite modernization mandates. Status report, Chen demanded, watching as the remaining Kryvac vessels regrouped. Port weapons array at 40%, Rodriguez reported, wiping blood from a cut above his cybernetic eye. Starboard hull showing critical stress fractures. But engineering says they can keep us fighting. Commander Wells limped to her side, his leg injured from a bridge console explosion. The colony's defenses are back online. Whatever the Kryvacs were using to suppress their systems, it couldn't handle our old-frequency communications. Martinez's Marines got their ground teams coordinated. Chen nodded, her mind racing through decades of combat experience. The Remembrance was wounded, but they'd broken the Kryvacs' momentum. More importantly, they'd shown that the aliens could be hurt. Admiral, Rodriguez called out, his voice tight. Multiple signatures incoming. More Kryvac ships, but something's different about these. The tactical display showed 5 new vessels, larger than the others. Their crystalline structures pulsed with darker energies, and their formation was unlike anything they'd seen before. They're adapting, Wells muttered. These must be their veterans. Chen's eyes narrowed. Good. Then they'll understand what happens next. All hands, this is the Admiral. What we've done here today has already changed the course of this war. The Kryvacs thought humanity would break easily. You've proven them wrong. But now comes the hard part. She took a moment to study the faces of her bridge crew. Men and women who'd given their entire lives to defending humanity. Every person on this ship knows the price of victory. We've all paid it before, watched friends pay it. Today we pay it again, but we make it count. In engineering, Taurus and her team worked frantically, using skills honed over decades to keep the Remembrance's systems operational. The ship's aged reactor core hummed dangerously, pushed beyond its limits by veterans who knew exactly how far they could bend the rules before they broke. Rerouting power through the auxiliary systems, Torres reported, just like Proxima, Sarah. We got one good push left in her. Colonel Martinez's voice joined the channel. Ground teams report the colony's defense grid is at 70%. Whatever we do next, they can support us. Chen studied the tactical display, seeing patterns in the enemy formation that reminded her of a dozen different battles across her long career. The Kryvacs had brought their best now, but so had humanity. Plot a course through their formation, she ordered. Maximum thrust. Engineering. Give us everything you've got left. Weapons. Target these points. She marked positions that seemed random to modern targeting systems, but would make sense to gunners who'd fought in the consortium wars. That's a suicide run, Wells said quietly. No. Chen's voice was firm. It's a veteran's gambit. The kind of move you only learn to make after you've seen enough battles to know when it's worth the cost. She opened a channel to all decks. All hands, secure for maximum acceleration. This isn't about survival anymore. It's about showing the galaxy that humanity's strength isn't in our technology or our numbers. It's in our will to win, no matter the price. The Remembrance's engines roared to life one final time, its hull groaning as it accelerated toward the enemy formation. The veteran crew moved with grim determination, each person knowing their role in what was to come. Multiple targeting locks, Rodriguez reported calmly. They're trying to predict our trajectory. Let them try, Chen replied. You can't calculate human determination in your targeting algorithms. The space between the ships lit up with weapons fire. The Remembrance's guns blaze, each shot placed with the precision that only decades of experience could provide. The Kryvax ships responded with overwhelming force, their advanced weapons tearing into the human vessel's armored hull. But the Remembrance endured, pushing forward as fragments of its outer hull were stripped away. Its veteran crew fought with the coordination that came from countless battles, each person compensating for failing systems with skill and intuition that no computer could match. Shield generators failing, Torres reported, her voice steady despite the chaos in engineering. Diverting power from life support to weapons. Just like old times, eh? The ship plunged deeper into the enemy formation, its guns finding weak points that only veteran eyes could spot. Two more Kryvax ships shattered, their crystalline structures breaking apart as ancient tactics proved their worth against modern technology. For every friend we've lost, Chen whispered as she watched her crew make their stand. For every battle we fought. For every time they said we were too old, too obsolete to matter. Show them why they should have left us in retirement. The Remembrance blazed through space like a dying star, its veteran crew writing one final chapter in humanity's long history of defiance against impossible odds. News of the Remembrance's stand spread through human space like wildfire. On 100 colonies, aging veterans watched grainy footage of the battle, recognizing tactics they'd used decades ago. In mothballed shipyards, engineers pulled old warships from storage, remembering how those obsolete vessels had won humanity's early wars. Admiral Chen stood in the Remembrance's battle-scarred bridge, surrounded by repair crews. The ship had survived its desperate charge, though just barely. Torres and her engineering team had performed miracles, keeping systems running that should have failed hours ago. Message from High Command. Rodriguez announced, his remaining organic eye bloodshot from exhaustion. They're mobilizing the veteran reserve fleet. Every ship we retired in the last 30 years is being recommissioned. About time, Wells muttered, studying damage reports. The Kryvax lost 8 ships here. More importantly, they lost their aura of invincibility. Chen nodded, watching through the viewport as civilian ships evacuated New Eden's population. The colony was damaged but intact, the first human world to repel a Kryvax assault. What about the other colonies? Reports coming in from all sectors, Rodriguez replied, a hint of pride in his voice. Retired military personnel are volunteering en masse. They're calling it the Gray Legion. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Elena Santos, the Remembrance's 70-year-old chief medical officer, treated wounded crew members while instructing younger medics in techniques developed during the resource-scarce consortium wars. Modern medicine relies too much on automated diagnosis, she explained, her hand steady as she worked. Sometimes you need to trust experience over technology. The ship's internal comms crackled to life with a transmission from the surface. Colonel Martinez's voice was tired but triumphant. Admiral, you need to see this. The colonial militia, they're learning. Our veterans are teaching them the old ways, how to fight when the high-tech systems fail. Chen made her way to the tactical room, where Wells had assembled senior staff for a briefing. The holoscreen showed footage from across human space, retired soldiers training colonial defenders, experienced engineers modifying modern weapons with proven reliability upgrades, veteran pilots teaching manual combat maneuvers that no eye could predict. The Kryvax made a critical mistake, Chen addressed her officers. They studied our current military doctrine, but ignored our history. They learned to counter our technology, but never understood our experience. She gestured to the tactical display showing enemy movements across the sector. Look at their deployment patterns. They're spreading themselves thin, trying to adapt to threats they can't predict. Because every colony they attack now has veterans showing the defenders how we won our early wars. Wells added. Tactics the Krivax computers can't analyze because they predate modern combat algorithms. In the ship's hangar, maintenance crews led by veterans restored damaged fighters using techniques that had kept spacecraft flying during humanity's resource-poor expansion era. Their methods weren't elegant, but they worked. And more importantly, they were impossible for Krivax systems to predict and counter. Message from the Arcturus colony, Rodriguez reported. Their veteran reserve units repelled a Krivax probe force using modified mining equipment and combat techniques from the resource wars. Minimal casualties. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy's about to learn why humanity survived its bloodiest conflicts. It wasn't just technology or numbers. It was experience. The wisdom to know which risks to take, which rules to break, and when to trust instinct over automation. A priority transmission cut through the ship's comms. Admiral Jensen, Chen's old colleague from the Consortium Wars, appeared on screen. Sarah, High Command has approved Operation Legacy. We're bringing everyone back. Every veteran who can fight. Every retired ship that can fly. The Krivax want to see humanity's real strength. We'll show them what 1,000 years of combined combat experience looks like. Throughout human space, a transformation was taking place. Retired Marines taught colonists how to maintain fighting effectiveness when communications were jammed. Former Special Forces operators shared survival techniques that had kept humans alive on 100 hostile worlds. Engineering veterans modified modern factories to produce simpler, more reliable weapons that couldn't be hacked or disabled. The Krivax thought they could predict us. Chen addressed her crew as the Remembrance prepared to join a growing fleet of recommissioned vessels. They analyzed our current capabilities, our standard tactics, our reliance on advanced technology. But they never understood that humanity's greatest weapon has always been our ability to learn from experience. The tactical display showed dozens of veteran-led task forces moving to defensive positions across human space. Each group was adapting old tactics to new situations, creating a constantly evolving strategy that the Krivax couldn't predict or counter. They called us obsolete, Wells said, watching the fleet movements. Said we were relics of a bygone era. We are relics, Chen replied, her voice carrying the weight of decades of hard-won wisdom. We're the relics who remember every mistake, every victory, every lesson paid for in blood. And now we're teaching those lessons to a new generation. As the Remembrance moved to join the gathering fleet, Chen knew that the war's turning point wasn't just about military victory. It was about humanity rediscovering its strength, not in technology alone, but in the accumulated wisdom of those who had spent their lives defending it. The veterans were back in the fight, and they were about to show the galaxy why experience would always triumph over pure technological superiority. The combined fleet hung in the dark space above Earth, a mix of modern warships and recommissioned vessels from every era of human space warfare. At its heart, the Remembrance floated like a battle-scarred badge of honor, its hull bearing the marks of dozens of engagements against the Krivax over the past 3 months. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, watching as veteran-commanded ships moved into formation. The tactical display showed thousands of vessels, some pulled from museums, others salvaged from scrapyards, all crewed by those who remembered humanity's hardest battles. Krivax fleet approaching, Rodriguez announced. Largest concentration we've seen. They've committed everything to this attack. Of course they have, Chen replied. Earth is humanity's cradle. They think taking it will break our spirit. She studied the enemy formation, but they still don't understand what they're facing. The enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace, a vast armada of crystalline ships that filled the sky with otherworldly light. Their vessels had evolved over the months of conflict, incorporating countermeasures against the veterans' tactics. But that was exactly what Chen had been counting on. All ships, This is Admiral Chen. Her voice carried across the combined fleet. For 3 months, we've shown the galaxy that humanity's strength lies not in our technology, but in our experience. Today, we prove it once and for all. Initiative Omega is in effect. Across the fleet, veteran crews sprang into action. The Kryvax had spent months adapting to human tactics from previous wars, exactly as planned. Now, humanity would show them something new, something born from centuries of combined combat experience. Formations Delta through Kappa, execute. Chen watched as groups of ships moved with precise coordination. Each formation was led by veterans of different conflicts, combining tactics from a dozen wars into patterns that no predictive algorithm could anticipate. The Kryvax fleet responded, their advanced systems attempting to analyze and counter the human movements. But they found themselves facing an enemy that had spent 3 months feeding them carefully chosen data, teaching their predictive systems to expect certain responses that would never come. They're trying to adapt, Wells observed, watching the enemy ships adjust their formation. But their combat computers are working against them now. Because they learned what we wanted them to learn, Chen replied. Every veteran knows. Sometimes you have to lose a few battles to win the war. The space between the fleets erupted in a storm of weapons fire. Modern warships executed complex maneuvers, while their veteran-commanded counterparts used seemingly outdated tactics that proved devastatingly effective. The Kryvax found their advanced targeting systems confused by electronic warfare techniques dating back to humanity's first space conflicts, modified and combined in ways their adaptive algorithms couldn't process. In engineering, Torres coordinated with other veteran engineers across the fleet, implementing innovations born from decades of jury-rigging solutions in combat. Showing these aliens why you never underestimate old engineers, she reported, her voice carrying the satisfaction of expertise proven right. Colonel Martinez's Marines, now training forces across the fleet, had prepared boarding parties that combine modern equipment with battle-tested techniques from a dozen different eras of warfare. Ready to show them what hand-to-hand combat really means, she reported from her assault ship. The battle raged across the solar system, but it wasn't just a clash of weapons. It was the culmination of humanity's martial history. Every lesson learned, every sacrifice made, every victory and defeat that had shaped their species' path to the stars. Look at their formation, Wells pointed out. They're trying to match our adaptability, but they can't, Chen finished, because they're trying to learn in months what we spent centuries perfecting. The Remembrance plunged into the heart of the enemy fleet, leading a charge that demonstrated why humanity had survived every threat it had ever faced. Veterans who had fought in the resource wars coordinated with survivors of the consortium conflicts, combining centuries-old tactics with modern technology in ways the Kryvax could never have predicted. Enemy fleet showing signs of disarray, Rodriguez reported. Their adaptive algorithms are failing. They're actually shutting down their combat computers. Chen allowed herself a grim smile, because they finally realized that relying on predictive technology against an enemy powered by human experience was their biggest mistake. The battle turned decisively. Without their predictive combat systems, the Kryvax found themselves facing an enemy that fought with intuition honed over decades. Human veterans, who had spent their lives learning when to trust instinct over technology, demonstrated why experience would always triumph over pure computational power. As the enemy fleet began to break apart, Chen opened a channel to all ships. "This is humanity's true strength," she declared. "Not our weapons or our technology, but the wisdom passed down through generations of defenders. Every veteran who returned to duty, every lesson shared with the next generation, every scar earned protecting our species, this is what makes humanity unconquerable." The Kryvax fleet retreated, their remaining ships vanishing into hyperspace. But they left behind more than destroyed vessels. They left a lesson that would echo through the galaxy. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been its technology, but the indomitable spirit of those who wielded it. In the aftermath, as recovery ships moved through the battlefield, Chen stood with her fellow veterans on the Remembrance's observation deck. High Command wants to upgrade the fleet, Wells informed her, but they want us to oversee it, to make sure we never forget the lessons we've learned. Chen nodded, watching Earth shine below them. The veterans had done more than win a war. They had ensured that humanity would never again mistake technological superiority for true strength. Let them modernize, she said finally. But make sure every new ship has a veteran crew member. Every tactical officer learns the old ways alongside the new. Because the next threat humanity faces won't be defeated by technology alone. It will be defeated by the wisdom of those who remember. The Remembrance's aged hull gleamed in the sunlight, its battle scars a testament to the truth that would shape humanity's future. In the end, experience would always triumph over pure advancement, and the surest path to victory lay in remembering the lessons of the past.